Tonight, what is seen as a step in the right direction, at least, the Catholic Church in Argentina has helped to convict 2 priests for sexually abusing children. The priests will likely spend the rest of their lives in prison. But the reason that they were convicted may have to do more with the depravity of their crime. And when I say depravity, boy, do I mean it. Listen to this. See, they didn't only abuse little boys. They abused little boys who couldn't speak out. They were deaf. It's a horrible case for a church that has still never really properly come to grips, many would argue, with the sexual abuse of children, mostly boys. Joining us now, News with Rick Sanchez, special correspondent Michelle Greenstein, who's been working on this story. Tell us about this deal in Argentina, first of all.
Sure. In late November, 2 priests from Argentina were convicted for, like you said, sexually abusing deaf children. Now, they did this at a Catholic school for deaf children called the Provolo Institute. And one of the defendants is Nicola Bruno Corradi Soliman, who is actually an Italian priest who, for some reason, was allowed to become the director of the Provolo Institute, despite having faced previous accusations of sexual abuse in 3 cities prior to this case. That's it coming out right there. Right. Now, in this trial that lasted over 3 months, a tribunal in Mendoza, Argentina, sentenced him to 42 years in prison, and the other priest, who is an Argentine priest, to 45 years in prison. Now, some of the victims were actually present at the sentencing, some of these former students of the Provolo Institute, as well as some parents. Let's take a listen to one of these parents.
All right, Shalom Akim. I like to say Kahalayam, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Makakwadash. That belongs to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone that rule well. Peace and salutation to the Akim around the world that push the shoot to the 4 corners of the earth. Right, this is Yaraba from the GMS Trinidad East Camp. As I say, I'll do a touch on this. As you can see, they said it was usually, the Catholic priests, they're popular for raping little boys. But this time it was little boys who couldn't even speak to defend themselves. And they see they said that the person who actually put in charge, he had accusations against him even before about molestation. It even had articles previously before this that talk about the Catholic priests having child trafficking rings. You understand?
I'm very satisfied. The truth is, yes, now my son will be able to breathe. He will be able to live because now they're in prison. They've been sentenced. It's very distressing.
Now, according to the Washington Post, church officials, including Pope Francis, were actually made aware of these allegations against Corradi in 2014, but they didn't start an investigation into this man until 3 years later, once he had been arrested. And according to the New York Times, this is something you're going to love. This is really interesting. When Pope John Paul II was living in Poland, he actually claimed that sexual abuse allegations as a whole were just attempts to smear and discredit the church. And this actually remained his stance for the next couple of decades. So whether you like it or not, this is actually coming from the top down. In fact, in 2002, he put into writing that all charges against priests were to be reported secretly to the Vatican and actually have these hearings held in private in chambers. Now, this case...
So even the Pope himself was trying to cover up and even protect priests that was doing this wickedness. Why? Because he wicked just like them. You understand? He wicked just like them. He just do the same things that they just do and they just protect their own.
That we're talking about today, the case against these 2 priests in Argentina, are just one example of pedophile priests being allowed to advance into these high positions, in this case as school officials. But in one case in the United States, where the Archbishop of Boston even claimed that the boy and his parents contributed to the abuse by being negligent after one of his priests was sexually assaulting a 6-year-old, the Archbishop, whose name was Cardinal Bernard Law, actually was promoted by Pope John Paul II to head of one of Rome's major basilicas. So people are saying this as an example of a lack of accountability in this organization. And not only was he promoted to that position, he was also from then on able to live with diplomatic immunity. Now, when it comes to the United States, which is...
Now, for those who don't know, diplomatic immunity is like to be immune from taxes and from certain laws, whereas there are certain people that you can't arrest, who have diplomatic immunity. You can't arrest them, or it has certain laws that don't apply to them, in other words. And this is rights and privileges he wanted to give to somebody who was known to be a what? A molester.
Where we are today, the statute of limitation laws are actually a really significant part of this sex abuse story. According to a Philadelphia-based nonprofit called Child USA, the average child abuse victim doesn't come forward until they're 52 years old. That's on average. So this is long after most statute of limitations expires in most states, right? So this means that priests can move on with jobs, their community relationships, and the law is left virtually impotent when it comes to holding these people accountable. And when it comes to responsibility from the church, we have church officials often employing the language of repentance and forgiveness rather than accountability or even incarceration, despite the fact that
I'll read a scripture quick. It's Isaiah 10, verse start from 1, right? It says, woe to them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed. And that is what these Catholic priests be doing. And they just be trying to do this while trying to keep an image or a facade of the Most High. Because they just proclaim themselves or profess themselves to be godly. But and really and truly, they just be using that image to do wickedness. And the people are none the wiser, because there are people who seeing constantly that these so-called Catholic priests, these so-called men of God, doing these things, and they will have nothing bad to say about them. There are people who still believe in Catholicism even to this day, even though their leaders doing these kind of things. And the scriptures say what you would know them by the fruit. So if there's the kind of things that they're doing, then it's obvious what they're teaching can be correct, and the people will accept them. But for the men of the Lord who are teaching the truth and actually showing them what the scriptures actually say, they will say the men of the Lord are demons. You understand? And they will say that we are devils. But these are things that we expect. Why? Because the scriptures say that. Yahushua Mashiach himself said, you see, if they call the head of the house Beelzebub, what else you'll expect for his actual servants? Just paraphrasing. Not those who are trying to look like his servants, but his actual servants. We will have to go through the same thing. Right, I read it over. It says, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees and write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment. And that what they just be doing by trying to protect these priests and them. It's very rare that a Catholic priest will actually be convicted for child molestation. It says, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey. You understand? But in this situation, children is the prey. You understand? You say that widows might be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless.
child molestation is a felony.
All right, thanks so much, Michelle, on that story. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Tom Doyle is a former priest.
And this is a part I wanted to touch on, very importantly also, because this guy was a priest, and he for speaking out against it, he's not a priest anymore.
He left the priesthood after, criticizing the church for what it had done. He did this 30 years ago, and still he does not believe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that they're not where they need to be. You started this battle some 30-some years ago?
1984.
You went to essentially the bishops and said, we've got a problem in this church, and the problem is?
The problem is that there's a whole underground of sexual abuse of children going on that they were not acknowledging, that was covered in a thick blanket of secrecy. And the problem wasn't so much the dysfunctional priests that were doing it, it was the bishops that were hiding it and covering it up and lying about it.
But listen to what you just said. The words are lost on us now because we've heard so much about it. Imagine in any other corporation, you go to the CEO and you say, we've got a problem in our company. People in our company are abusing little boys.
Yeah.
The first thing you do is you call the police.
Yeah, exactly. But
not here?
No, of course not. Because the main issue is keep cover for the top, protect the leadership, which is the bishops and the papacy, protect them. You're talking about a political structure that is a monarchy. Now, who are the most important people in the monarchy? The monarchs.
Yeah, the royals.
The royals.
Yeah.
And so that's been the issue all the way through. I learned that the hard way when I first became involved in this, and I was working in the Vatican Embassy at the time, down on Mass Avenue. And I naively thought that once the bishops found out about this, and at that time we thought, we didn't have any idea that the other guys, two guys that were working with me on this, we had no clue how widespread this was. And we naively thought, once they find out about this, how bad it is, they're going to snap to, do the right thing, and take care of business. And I was 214% wrong.
I'm Catholic, you're Catholic. We grew up with the foundation of the church, which is all about Jesus Christ. If you really believe in Jesus Christ and you hear that somebody's abusing little boys, just in the name of Jesus alone, you'd think you want to act. What you're saying is they believed less in the foundations of Jesus Christ, which is the church, than they did protecting their fiefdom.
Exactly. That's precisely the issue.
So there's 2 Corinthians 11 verse 14, right? It say, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. You understand? Because even when it comes to spiritual Satan itself, when he's trying to tempt you to do something that's off, how it is, he has tried to put it to you. He has tried to put it to you like if it's something good. Like you seen them cartoons, you see the one on your left shoulder and the one on your right shoulder. And the one on your left shoulder will try to encourage you to do something that's off, but you could try to make it look like if it's something good to persuade you to do it. You understand? He try to portray himself as what, an angel of light. And this also goes for who? It say therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness. And his ministers is who? These ones that do wickedly, you understand, who do things and pray to Satan and follow after Satan, but they try to make themselves look like the of the Most High. You understand? A good example is who? These Catholic priests. They are the ministers of Satan. Even these Jews and them across in Jerusalem who try to act like us, they are the ministers of Satan. Because they do the things of Satan, but they try to make themselves look like if they are of the Lord, like if they are if they are angelic. And so therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. So they will have to answer for these things. You understand? For blaspheming, for doing wickedly. You understand? But for deceiving the people and making some of the people think that, that they of the Lord really and truly they of Satan.
I was asked at a convention one time, I had given a talk, can I explain why this has happened? It's both a complex and a simple answer. And I said, I believe, and this is going to sound harsh, but I believe that the hierarchy that had protected this issue, they may be highly orthodox, believing Catholics, but I don't think they're deeply committed Christians.
Wow.
And that's the problem.
Let me ask you a question. Is part of the reason that they didn't act to remove these priests who were abusing boys is because perhaps in the past they, not all, may have done the same thing?
That's the case with some. It's a proven fact that there were some bishops that protected this, did nothing about it because they themselves were compromised.
Gosh.
And it came out later. Classic example was the former bishop who's now deceased of Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Right.
Bob Sanchez, who a lot of the priests knew about it. He did absolutely nothing when confronted with these issues. And at the time, in the early 90s, Santa Fe and Albuquerque were the epicenter of this issue.
Explain to me something that is uncomfortable to speak about, but I don't think we can avoid it because it's the elephant in the room. I read last night in my research for this interview that upwards of 50%, according to some estimates, of priests are gay. Why are gay men so attracted to the priesthood?
So there was saying in the word, it says a trait of the wicked to want to have a righteous look. It's something along that line that I see. Like, for example, if a woman is a whore, as whorish as she might be, she don't want anybody calling her a whore. She could always want the image of what a good woman, even though she know within herself that she's not. You understand? Because the wicked always like to have a righteous look. Now how you say here, why it is that gay men applying for the position of priesthood. You understand? Because they know to begin with the whole belief of Catholic, whereas you're not supposed to have a wife, is against the scriptures, because originally the Leviticus priesthood was given to Aaron and his sons, and they had wives. How else would their lineage would have been carried out? They were allowed to have wives. It had certain, guidelines, as in they could only have virgins and so forth, but they had wives. It never had any scriptures saying that a priest couldn't have a wife. You understand? This belief that they have is something man-made, manipulated from the scriptures, but it is not of the scriptures. You understand? But all these priests who gay, who homosexual, and actually flock into the priesthood is because why? They know that they just have charge over little children as priests, and they just abuse this. You understand? Because they inwardly their desire is wickedly. They're not of the Lord, and they have no interest in the Lord. And for the record, a man of the Lord cannot be gay. A man of the Lord cannot be gay. The scriptures said, any man that lie with mankind is supposed to be put to death. It never had gays in the priesthood. You understand? It have gays in their priesthood because they are not of the Lord. But there's no gays in the Lord's priesthood.
I wish I could give you a cogent answer to that question, but I can't. The fact is that a very high, 50% is maybe a little low percentage.
Wow.
And I don't know. I'm not an expert on that.
So you say 50% is maybe a little lower percentage. So he's trying to put it out there that is more than 50% that actually are homosexuals. And they have charge over little boys. And that just show the hypocrisy of these people. Because the priests, they don't want wives. Well, the guidelines of being a priest states that what? You can't have a wife. And for the so-called nuns, they're not supposed to have husbands. You understand? But these people are hypocrites. Why? Because the nuns, like I had an article the other day, it had some nuns that went to some country, and the two of them, when they come back, the belly was big. You understand? They was whining back, wherever they was. And they're not supposed to have husbands. And for the Catholic priests now, when they're not supposed to have wives, they're content with that, but yet they interfere with little boys. And that even show you the mindset that they're on. Because if they were even of some kind of righteous mindset, any whatsoever, if they were restricted from having wives, if they were really of any kind of righteous mindset, they would go behind closed doors and have women. Just like how they say with Rastafarians. In public, Rastafarians don't eat meat. But in private, they just eat meat because that is what they desire. If these priests really desired women, when they go behind closed doors, they would have went with women. But that is not what they're doing. They're going with little boys, and that inwardly showing you that they are wicked.
But I can tell you this.
And it's not to disparage someone who's gay.
I served, as an active priest for decades, and I knew a number of the men I served with were gay, and I found out later that even more. Many of these men were wonderful men. They were good priests. The fact that they were gay had no bearing on their dedication,
right,
on their willingness and desire to serve people. But then there's another dimension.
To serve people, not the Lord. You cannot serve the Lord and be a homosexual. You understand? There's a conflict of interest.
But that is problematic, as it is in any society. There was a subculture that was involved in power and relationships and all kinds of goofy things.
And suppression. I mean,
yeah.
I have to ask, the fact that you're asking men to spend their life without having a relationship, a physical relationship, has to be part of the cause?
It is. The whole concept of mandatory celibacy is lunacy because it doesn't work. It's contrary to human nature, and it's based on an understanding of human sexuality that goes back to pre-Christian times that is completely fallacious.
And that, yes or no, is part of the problem.
Yes.
Tom Doyle, thank you for coming on and sharing this information with us. Great interview.
Thank you.
That has nothing to do with the actual problem. They go behind little boys because they like little boys. If they liked women, they would have gone behind women. That has nothing to do with the problem. They try to use that to make it look like if it's the problem, but it's not the problem. They will always go behind what they desire, which are little boys. Anyway, with that, you say shalom.